Hello everyone and welcome to my review for a show that I've actually not talked about for quite a few years, and that is The Flash. And today we're going to be reviewing Season 6, which just wrapped up a couple of days ago as of recording this. Of course, as you guys will currently know, due to the coronavirus pandemic, many TV shows had to shut down their productions, including The Flash, which meant that episode 19 that we just had ended up serving as a unintended season finale. And so because of that, the entire season is now over and done with. And I wanted to review The Flash for quite a while, especially this season, because I've really been enjoying it. But I didn't really see much of a point in reviewing it episode by episode, because by the time I got around to wanting to do that, there was only 3 episodes of the season left. So it didn't really make a lot of sense. So now that the season's all over and done with, I'm going to be reviewing the season right here, right now, talk about the things that I really liked about the season, what I didn't like. So yeah, just with that all being said, let's get into the review. So a bit of a backstory with my relationship with The Flash as a show. I loved the first 2 seasons. I think they're absolutely fantastic. Some of the best seasons on the entire Arrowverse, in my opinion. Season 3 is kind of where it started to go wrong for me. If you guys remember back, I think like 2 years ago, I made a video about the problems with Season 4 of The Flash. And I talked about how Season 3 for me just kind of strayed a bit too far away of what made Season 1 and 2 very good. Season 4 I didn't like either. It was just a mishmash of ideas and tones that didn't go together at all. Season 5 was basically just the Nora show. So when I went to Season 6, obviously with Eric Wallace as the new showrunner for the season, taking over from Todd Helbig, I was obviously very optimistic about that. But wow, this season was far better than I thought it was going to be. I really liked this season. I think the thing that I really liked the most was that I feel like this season was finally able to evenly spread out good storylines to all of the cast. All of the cast got some really good material to dig onto this season. I think in particular Iris. I really like what they did with Iris this season. She's been a character for me that they've just never really known what direction to take her. They tried to make her this ultra head, like lead team member of Team Flash, and it didn't really work for me. And then they tried to do journalism stuff with it, especially Season 5, but it just went nowhere. This season, they finally nailed a good storyline for Iris, especially with Black Hole, and it just really gave her something to do that was integral to the plot, but was different enough that it could be her little own side adventure. And I thought Candice Patton played it really well, especially when we get to the back half of the season, and we have, of course, the mirror Iris that shows up. I know some people were complaining because, oh, it's not the real Iris, but I really like that version of Iris, and especially because, again, it gave Candice Patton something different to work with, and you could tell that she was just going at it. See, and I really enjoyed just everything they did with her character. For me, she probably was the MVP of the whole season for me, and I just really love what they did with Iris. So, you know, big thumbs up to Eric Wallace, because he's finally managed to get Iris as a character spot on. And all the other characters as well also got really good stuff to do this B season. Of course, Barry really got a lot of story to chew on, especially during the first half of the season. Of course, in the lead up to Crisis, he had the whole storyline with him and Ramsey, who I'll get onto in a bit when I talk about the villains, but kind of the parallel storyline with Barry accepting his fate, that he has to sacrifice himself in the Crisis because he's seen himself die in the upcoming event, and him preparing for that. Really cool and awesome to see. I love the stuff there with Caitlin as well this season, and her and Frost in particular. I think the dynamic they got between her and Frost is the best they've had so far since they introduced Killer Frost as this separate entity of Caitlin. I think it's the best that they've managed to do it since Season 3. Ralph, again, really love what they did with him. I loved his storyline, especially what they did with Sue when they brought her in later on in the season. That was all really cool to see. And I also like Cisco this season as well. He doesn't do as much this season as I thought he was going to. There's quite a few episodes where it very much feels like he's a background character, and I don't know whether that was because they were planning to maybe have him just slowly ease out of the show, or maybe Carlos Valdez wanted to leave. But that's the impression that I got. But I still enjoyed Cisco this season and what he did. He just doesn't play as integral a role as he did do in the previous seasons. We also had the new version of Harrison Wells introduced this season with Nash Wells, and I very much enjoyed him for the most part. The only thing that I didn't really like about his character was the whole setup for him becoming Pariah in the crossover. For me, that never really made a lot of sense. It very much felt forced into the season as a way to set up Crisis, because if you literally take that out, I think they did a really good job with his character, with his whole storyline of where he comes from, and of course his relationship with Allegra. It was just also something that was really good. And by the way, Allegra as well, really liked her as a character and Really excited to see what they do with her next season, especially since they're very much teasing that they're going to do more with her character. But in terms of Nash Wells, I loved him. I loved the episode that we had with the exorcism of Nash Wells, where of course we have the Reverse Flash trying to take over his body. That was just brilliant. And Tom Cavanaugh, again, was just amazing as usual. For me, this is probably my favourite version of Harrison Wells that we've had since Harry Wells from Earth 2 in Season 2. Again, with this season, he's just far more consistently well written, and he was a far more interesting character. Again, take out the Crisis setup, and for me, we have a brilliant version of Harrison Wells. I think something else that also benefits this season so much is the villains. We have, of course, kind of this very distinct villain for each half of the season. You know, it's kind of split up into graphic novels, as Eric Wallace put it. First half of the season, we have Ramsey Russo / Bloodwork as the main antagonist, and he was brilliant. I loved Ramsey so much as a villain, and I think the thing that really worked about him so much was the fact that he very much was kind of this dark mirror version of the Flash. Not in, say, like Zoom, where he's a speedster and all of that, but in terms of motivations. You know, we find out that Ramsey is someone who is dying. He's trying to find ways to save himself. And then Barry is ultimately in the same situation because he knows that apparently he's supposed to die in Crisis, and you know, he's trying to find every way imaginable to find a different outcome. And I just loved that kind of linking of ideologies, but a completely different way of how the two go about it. It just made him such an incredible villain, and I just really hope that they do bring him back in future seasons. It definitely seems as if that's what they were setting up as the season went along, because I really hope that's the case. I just loved him, and for me, he's probably my favourite villain we've had since Season 2, without question. He's the most consistent, he's the most well written, and I think in terms of his rivalry with the Flash was just also just on another level. It really was up to like Zoom and Reverse Flash levels of just pure great chemistry between the two lead actors of hero and villain. And then of course we have Ava McCulloch, or the new version of the Mirror Master that we're getting, and I also really liked her because she's not really an antagonist. Like Ramsey, she's very much a character that just has a conflict of interest with Team Flash, even though they're really going after the same person, because of course she's very integral to the whole Black Hole storyline. Her husband, Joseph Carver, is the CEO of Black Hole, so she's very much in agreement with Team Flash and that he needs to be taken down, but it's the methods that she uses and the way she goes around it is ultimately what causes them to butt heads. And I also really just loved her as a villain as well. Again, I just love how this season really did have just so many more layers to the antagonists than we had in previous seasons, where it felt like they tried to do it but not very well. I mean, Clifford DeVoe for me is a pure example of that, and of course Cicada that we had last season, they tried to do that with Grace but it never worked out. Here for me, they got it spot on with these two, and they're easily two of my favourite villains that we've had on The Flash so far, and they just worked absolute wonders. In terms of standout episodes, the episode that really stood out to me the most was episode 7, I think, The Last Temptation of Barry Allen Part 1. Absolutely brilliant episode. For me, the best episode of The Flash that we've had, I'd say maybe since Enter Flash Time in Season 4, if not then probably sometime during Season 3. It was a brilliant episode. It was a great way of setting up the conclusion to Bloodwork's arc in the first half of the season and Barry's arc of accepting his fate during Crisis. It was just brilliant. The entire episode, the way it was built up, the emotional scenes, was just fantastic. But there were so many other great episodes. Again, I loved the premiere. I loved the part 2 of that storyline that comes in the episode straight afterwards. But I also really enjoyed the episode 19, the unintentional mid-season finale, as I always call it. It was actually a pretty good finale for what it was when it wasn't supposed to be one. It was a really damn good episode. And again, there were probably many more episodes that I'm forgetting to mention, but just generally, I really enjoyed a lot of the episodes this season, and they all just really so much more consistent. Consistent is probably the key word compared to the previous seasons, where it was very much up and down in terms of quality. This season, it was a lot more streamlined, and that is something that I'll always appreciate, because one of the things I hate the most about TV is TV seasons that are really inconsistent with episode quality, and The Flash Season 6 does not suffer from that for the most part. So in terms of negatives for this season, I really don't have that many big ones for me. I think they're just mainly like nitpicks that I have, and one of them is something that's really kind of rooted in previous seasons, but I'll address that right now. For by far the weakest episode of the season was episode 11, and that is mainly because they bring back Aminette Black, who's a character that I have never enjoyed on The Flash. She just doesn't work for me, and I love Katie Sackhoff as an actress, but the way she portrays this character is just so irritating that I find it really hard to watch. and then you've got, you know, it's just, the episode in of itself, it just feels so wrong for the tone that this show tries to go for. And then you throw in Goldface, who doesn't really work either as a villain for me. I just really did not like that episode. It was the only episode of the whole season where I genuinely wasn't enjoying it throughout. There's other episodes where I maybe had a few problems with certain things. For example, in episode, I believe it's 17, there's all these elements that are set up with the mirror versions of Iris that they try to play off as these things to get us emotionally attached to the mirror Iris for when she dies, but they're never really set up in previous episodes, and so it felt very kind of rushed and kind of ideas that were just never properly explored. They're just really more nitpicks for me in certain episodes, but in terms of episodes that I flat out didn't like, for me, episode 11 is the only one of this season that I could put in the bad category. Again, I think this season is very consistent for the most part, except for that episode, because it is pure shit. I also wasn't a big fan of Camilla this season either. I don't really think she did a lot to really service the plot. For me, her character was just there in Season 5 to set up a potential exit for Cisco, and then because he didn't leave, they're now trying to find an excuse for her to stay around. And I just don't think she works as a character at all. She seems very out of place for me, and that's nothing to do with the actors. It's just simply because I think they've got such a big cast in this ensemble that she just feels very much like the odd one out. And if she were to leave next season, which I've heard rumoured is potentially the case, I think it would probably be for the better, just because I don't really care about her as a character, and also I just don't really feel like they did a lot with her this season to make me want to care about her. And the last one would probably be that whilst I really loved the nuance that they gave to Bloodwork and Ava McCulloch in this season as antagonists, Joseph Carver doesn't really get that same treatment. He's kind of the main big bad, I'd say, for the back half of the season. He's basically the character that Ava and Team Flash are going for, but I never really found him all that amazing as a villain. He was very serviceable, I think is probably the best way to put it. I think it's just the fact that because Bloodwork and Ava were so well written, when I look at Joseph Carver, he doesn't really stand out for me. He very much feels like a more generic villain. But again, it's not a huge complaint, because when you've got 2 out of 3 villains that are absolutely amazing and one that's maybe not that great, it's something that I can let slide. If he was, say, just the primary big bad and Ava and Bloodwork didn't exist, I think this would probably be more of an issue for me. And I sort of get why he's written in that way, because obviously they have to write a type of character that both, like I say, Ava and Team Flash can go for. I just wish he was written with a little more nuance and a little bit more ambiguously than they ended up writing him in the show. But I think that's more of a preference for me rather than a full-on criticism of the season. So overall, I really enjoyed The Flash Season 6. It was a really, really good season, very much a huge step in the correct direction for this show, which had been kind of, for me, going on a bit of a slide for the past few years, but this season has really brought a lot of stability, and I think just made the fans in general a lot more optimistic for the future of the show. I really enjoyed this season, and so for that reason, I'm going to be giving it a solid 8.5 out of 10. It could get bumped up to a 9, I don't really know. I think it probably would have been in contention had the season not unfortunately been cut short due to the pandemic. But I still really enjoyed this season, and like I say, for me personally, the best season of The Flash that we have had since Season 2. So what do you guys think of The Flash Season 6? Of course, let me know in the comment section down below. I want to thank you very much for watching the video. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I hope to see you all again next time.